about a person is that he was saved from the Holocaust and then he was killed in battle near Jerusalem. How did you find his family? Don't you? Even with DNA, you can't find his family. What do you mean you found his family? They said, we found his family, and the family is going today to commemorate the yard site of this soldier in Mount Herzl. And if you want, you could come meet them. This really piqued his curiosity. What are they talking about? What family of an anonymous soldier? You're talking about someone who died 70 years ago, approximately 7 decades ago. How do you find family after 7 decades? Somebody who's buried in a grave. His curiosity is so intense, he travels there to the grave. He wants to meet the family, this mysterious family which appeared from nowhere. He comes to the grave, and who does he meet? He meets the boys of that class. Those boys who gave him such a difficult time, who were so cynical, who were so difficult to mentor and guide and inspire, they're all there at the grave. And they look at their guide, at their teacher, at the person who helped them navigate their transition in life from high school to the IDF. And they say 3 words in Hebrew. Matzanu hamishpacha shelo. We found his family. Anachnu hamishpacha shelo. We are his family. We decided after that visit that we will adopt him as family. We will commemorate the anniversary of his passing. We will give charity in his honor. We will do mitzvahs, good deeds, in tribute of his soul. We will study Torah and pray to connect to his powerful spiritual presence. We will be the ones who will perpetuate his memory in our lives as we do with our family. Anachnu hamishpacha shelo. We are his family. And Aryeh Eldad concluded the story. He said, these kids who gave me such a hard time, they seemed so apathetic, so indifferent. You know how teenagers can really, some of you know how they can really get on your nerves. And really, I saw when they were touched so deeply by this story and by this soldier. And it was such a sincere and genuine display and expression of what we call Achadut Yisrael, the oneness of the Jewish people, which comes from Ahavat Yisrael, the love of the Jewish people. Or as the title of tonight, we're all Jews, aren't we? Which really means we're family. We're connected. We fight like family, but we also must love each other like family. And it's true, we're family. There's no fight like a fight in the family. Those of you who have fights in the family know what I'm talking about. When a family fights, it's bitter because it's so deep, because we know how to get to each other in a very deep place. But there's no love and loyalty and trust like the love of a family. There was a video somebody made in Israel a little while ago. It touched me very deeply. It was a video of 2 people standing at a bus station. One is an older man, dressed respectfully, with a respectful hat, and near him there's a young fellow, looks like his early 20s, big tattoo on his arm with a gun. He has a gun tattooed on his entire arm. And he has a headset, he's listening to music, but the music is so loud that even those who are standing nearby the bus station can hear the music clearly. And it's music that is very rough and very tough. And this elderly Jew takes out a candy, little candy, and he makes a blessing. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam shehakol niyeh b'dvaro. The blessing we make on many foods that we eat. Blessed are you, God, the ruler of the universe, which everything came into existence through his energy. And he offers this fellow, this young fellow, also a candy. And he says, Achi, my brother, here's a candy. This guy says, why you call me My brother. We're not brothers. We're not brothers. He says, yeah, we're brothers. We're brothers. He says, we have nothing in common. We don't agree. I see you just made a blessing. You are a religious Jew. I am not a believing Jew. I'm a secular Jew. He says, okay, but we're brothers. So he says, really? Come with me to a restaurant to eat shrimp and lobster and pig, swine. Would you come if you're my brother? He says, I wouldn't come to eat those foods. So don't call me your brother. We don't have to eat in the same restaurant. We don't have to agree about everything, but we're still brothers. He says, nah, people like you don't even believe that people like me are really Jewish. You look at me as completely alien, as foreign. You don't look at me as a real Jew. When you look at my tattoo with a gun, you think people like me are going to burn in purgatory. You don't believe that I'm your brother. The Jew, older Jew, rolls up his sleeve and he says, I also have a tattoo. He points to a number engraved on the skin. I also have a tattoo. You have a tattoo and I have a tattoo. And let me tell you something. I had a great teacher. And this teacher taught me that you and I are brothers. He said, what? You had a great teacher who taught you that we're brothers? What was the name of this great teacher? And the Jew looks at him and he looks at his number and he says, the name of my teacher was Adolf Hitler. He taught me that we're brothers. And in that one line, he transformed this young, cynical, angry Jew who really resented him without knowing. In that one line, he captured the core of it. And the core comes down to a teaching that the Rabbi, whose yahrzeit we're soon going to commemorate, once taught. It was at a Purim gathering in the mid-60s. And he said that during the Holocaust years, we have seen an extraordinary phenomenon. And it comes down to this exact title. We're all Jews, aren't we? Joseph Mengele, when he made the selection in Auschwitz-Birkenau, this one to the right and this one to the left, he didn't ask, are you right-wing or are you a left-winger? Are you a conservative or are you liberal? Did you vote for Trump? Did you vote for Hillary? Are you religious? Are you secular? Are you conservative? Are you orthodox? Are you reform? Are you conservadox? Are you modern orthodox, ultra orthodox, ultra orthodox, Hasidic, fundamentalist, very right wing, very left wing, very open minded, very closed minded? Do you wear a Barcelino hat? Do you wear a Streimel? Do you wear a cap? Do you wear kippah strugar? Do you wear nothing? Those questions were not asked. Not because they're not questions. Not because opinions don't matter. Not because lifestyles don't matter. But there was another question that went deeper than every other question. The question was one. Are you a member of the Jewish people? Do you have Jewish blood flowing in your sinews? And if you do, that means that you must be exterminated from the face of this earth. Yes. He had a great teacher, this Jew says. I had a great teacher. Trust me, we're brothers. I'll never forget that scene. Some of you still remember this. Some of you have heard about it later. There was in 1980, the Miracle on Ice. Some of you remember the Miracle on Ice? When the Americans finally won the Soviets in the hockey game. Now, for years, the Soviets were always triumphant. Nobody even thought that there was a possibility for anybody to defeat them. But it was in 1980 till today, they call it the Miracle on Ice. The Soviets were defeated by the American team, and the coach was Herb Brooks. And one of the players once shared, he said, what happened? How did Herb Brooks get this American team to be able to defeat the experienced, professional, skilled, brilliant Soviets? Herb Brooks took his team and he had them train and practice and practice and practice. One night, he had them practice for hours on the ice to the point of such fatigue and exhaustion. One of the players said it felt like our feet were falling off. And then he had them practice again and again and again. And finally, said one of us players turned to him and said, Coach, how much longer are you going to torture us? Let us go home and relax and go to sleep. And he looked at them and he said, I will have you practice here until you guys figure out once and for all that the name on the front of your jersey is more important than the name on the back of your jersey. Only when you will realize that the name on the front of your shirt, of your sweater, is more important than the name on the back, I'll let you go home. And with this, of course, he conveyed to them the essence of what was lacking, the cohesiveness, the unity, the camaraderie, the sense of oneness. The name on the front is more important than the name on the back. Not that the name on the back is not important. Your individual name is extremely important. But you can't be a team if the name in the front is not as important or more important than the name on the back of the jersey. If you do not see yourself as part of one larger story, you will never be able to defeat your sworn enemies. That is how he turned it from an immature, divisive, fragmented team into a cohesive, unified, integrated entity. And the Miracle on Ice happened. And I find that so inspiring and relevant to our story as a people, because we have many battles to fight. And even now, you would think the story of George Floyd, murdered on May 25th, 2020 in Minneapolis, has really very little to do with the Jewish people. George Floyd was an African-American brother. The white police officer who had his knee on his neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds was not Jewish. Minneapolis has a Jewish community, but not the largest Jewish community. What in the world does this have to do? Does Black Lives Matter have to do with Israel or with the Jewish people? But of course, it always has to do with Israel and the Jewish people. And somehow, from an organization which otherwise has many worthwhile components and important components, to uproot every vestige which lacks human dignity from the face of our country and our earth, somehow there's voices of anti-Semitism, horrific voices against Israel. And I feel bad because otherwise there are many just and fair people who are fighting for good things, but those who use these platforms as a way to once again antagonize Israel, loathe the Jewish people, and spread blood libels, false stories about our people and our homeland, really make it difficult for so many decent people who don't want to be part of such lies to support what otherwise is often a worthy cause. But somehow, once again, anti-Semitism creeps in here. This has been the story since the first Jew walked the face of this earth, 1948, since creation. His name was Abraham. And it's easy to remember the year he was born because it's 1948, but it's not 1948 after the Common Era. It's 1948 according to the Jewish calendar, 1948 since creation. Since that day, they've been obsessed with the Jewish people. And our greatest power And our greatest source of fortitude and confidence is our unity, our oneness, our ability to be there for each other and connect to each other, despite the fact that you and I may have some differences of opinion and sometimes profound differences of opinion. But that does not mean that we're not brothers, that we're not sisters, that we are not deeply connected. We are one people, united by one Torah, and united and unified by the love of one God. And our function and our purpose is to reveal that oneness in the entire world. The verse says, Mi cha'amcha ki Yisrael goy echad ba'aretz. Who is like your nation Israel? One nation on earth. So the commentators say one nation means a unique nation. But the Alter Rebbe, Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, the founder of Chabad, says goy echad ba'aretz actually captures the Reza and the Yetra of our people. Goy echad ba'aretz, one nation on earth, means the nation whose purpose is to reveal echad, to reveal the oneness and the harmony in earth. Because we live in a world of fragmentation. When I look at another person, there's you and there's I. The cosmos is filled with so many organisms and so many beings and existences, and every one is the survival of the fittest. I am here for me and you are here for you. The story of our planet is a story of conflict and violence and bloodshed and greed and selfishness and narcissism and war and terrorism and divisiveness and fragmentation and bigotry and racism and prejudice and sometimes genocide and persecution and cruelty. And the role of the Jewish people is goy echad ba'aretz. To quote the Tanya, shegam bin yonei ha'eretz lo yafridu me'echad emes chas v'shalom. That even as physical human beings, souled and clothed in bodies, our role, our raison d'etre, our purpose is to reveal the harmony that exists within our entire planet and within our entire cosmos. Because since all of us come from one source, and all of us were conceived in love by one progenitor, by an infinite reality which combines all of us, it means essentially we're all one. And if the doors of perception are cleansed, everything would appear as is, a ray of infinity. The reason we seem so fragmented is because we do not see our true core. We do not see our true inner essence. But the moment you can cleanse the windows of perception, when you can dig deeper, when you can excavate what is beneath the superficial facades, then you discover harmony within yourself. You discover harmony between you and your neighbor, between you and your family member, between you and your community members, between you and all of the Jewish people, and between you and all of humanity and civilization, and between you and the whole world, because really the whole world is one. We are all unified. We are all deeply connected. The Mishnah says in Tractate Sanhedrin, page 37, Judaism teaches that we all come from the first person, Adam and Eve, the first Tati and Mami. We all come from Adam and Eve. And the Mishnah says there's a reason for it. So that never in history one person should never in history should one person have the ability to be able to turn to somebody else and say, I am superior to you. You are inferior to me. How can I be superior to and ultimately become exactly from the same source from Adam and Eve? How can I be superior to me? How can you be superior to me? I was invited a number of years ago to speak at the National Security Agency. They had there a professor from Columbia representing Islam. They had a professor representing Christianity. And they asked me to address the NSA on the topic of Judaism. This National Security Agency, if I'm not mistaken, has approximately 34,000 employees. At the gathering itself, there was a very large number. I don't remember, like 500 or 1,000 or a few thousand. But they told us that it was being broadcast and recorded and passed around. I don't know if it was live or subsequently, but I think it was live, to all or most of the employees, the thousands and thousands of employees of the National Security Agency. So I shared with them an insight, and I said, my dearest friends, I want to tell you something. If somebody asks, what does Judaism teach? Well, that's a pretty heavy question, a loaded question. There's a lot to say. But I want to bring out one of its most powerful points that's articulated right in the beginning of Genesis. Genesis says that Adam and Eve were both created as one in the image of God. B'Tselem Elokim Asa Adam. And the commentators are perturbed. Moses warns the Jewish people that they should not carve out a statue and attribute it to God because God is imageless. How can Genesis state that man or woman was carved in the image of God? The same Hebrew Bible repeats itself and admonishes and warns with the most strictest of terms against attributing an image to God, a picture, a visage, a color, a perspective. Lo re'isem kol tmuna, you have not seen any picture, any visage. And yet we say every person was created in God's image. Professor Abraham Joshua Heschel once quipped and he said, when did God commit the sin of idolatry? When he created a human being in the image of God. He made an image out of God. Interesting insight. But how are you supposed to explain this? What does it mean? And one of the explanations that's explained in the teachings and writings of Jewish mysticism and spirituality is that is exactly the point. The same verses in Genesis say, Zachar unekeva bara oisam vayikra shmam Adam b'tselem elikim asa Adam. The original Adam is Siamese twins, includes Adam and Eve together. They are in the image of God, which is telling us something very profound. Because God has no image, so therefore there's no one image which can capture God. There's no one person, one individual, one perspective, one color, one person which can capture an imageless God. How then do we capture God? It's when I create space for your image and you create space for my image. This then is the revolution of the Hebrew Bible, that you may not be in my image, but you're still in God's image. And I may not be in your image, but I'm still in God's image. We encounter God in the face of the stranger, in the face of the one who is not my image, just like you encounter God in the face of the one who is not your image. It's in the imagelessness of God that we encounter God. When I can transcend my image and realize you're not in my image, but you're in God's image. And I'm not in your image, but I'm in God's image. That synthesis, that unity is what allows human beings who have images to capture the imagelessness of God by not allowing truth to get stuck in one image or another image. I and you encounter God in the face of the other person. So the Mishnah says, God did not want that any person should be able to come to his friend and say, I am inherently superior to you. You are inherently superior to me. And I told the NSA, if only this can be taught, what God expects of each and every single human being living on the face of this earth, we would live in a different world. So essentially, what is our job as Jews? Our job as Jews is to teach this unity. Goy Echad Baruch, to teach. You're looking at a world, it looks completely diverse, completely fragmented, completely splintered, scattered, frazzled. But really, it's all one. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. It's all a manifestation of divine energy, of divine infinity, of we can excavate and go deeper than our superficiality and discover our essence. We will see the oneness. The only way we can teach this to the world is if we can teach this to ourselves. I cannot be unified with my own family, if I cannot be unified with my own community, if I cannot be unified with my own people, how can I teach this to the world? Great story I'll share with you. There was this Jew. Oh wow, it's so late. So there's a gewaldige story. There was this Jew. who needed to say Kaddish for his mother. He went to a wedding. He enjoyed the bar. He became tipsy. He fell asleep at the wedding. He woke up at 2:30 in the morning and he realized, oh, his mother's yahrzeit, the anniversary of his mother's death. He didn't say Kaddish. 2:30 in the morning. Where are you going to find a synagogue open 2:30 in the morning? You can find a synagogue open in Northern California. When I visited Sacramento a couple of years ago, you should know, Rabbi Cohen, my dear friend Rabbi Mendel Cohen from Chabad of Sacramento, took me to the synagogue to pray the evening services. It was only him and I. We went out. I asked him if I should lock the door. He said, don't lock the door. I said, you're going to leave the door open? He says, yeah, I leave the door open. I said, why? He said, because the Rebbe once said in a talk that if there's a synagogue, there has to be one synagogue in town that's always open for a Jew to come in 24 hours. He says, since I know other synagogues are not open, my synagogue has to be open. I don't know if that's still his tradition in Sacramento. And I know now with COVID-19, things have changed. But where are you going to find a synagogue 2:30 in the morning to say Kaddish for your mother? In Jerusalem, there's a group of synagogues, like it's called Zichron Moshe Shtiblach, like little synagogues, and people come to pray there 24 hours a day. He thought over there he'll find a minyan. So he goes over there. It's now 3 o'clock in the morning, but even there they were finished. No Kaddish for his mother. He felt so bad. So what did he do? He called a Jewish cab service company. And he says, could you send me 9 Jewish drivers to this and this place and I'll pay them? The guy says, 3 in the morning? I don't have no 9 drivers. He says, how many do you have? He says, I have 3. He says, send me 3. Then he calls different car service companies until he managed to get 9 Jewish drivers who happen to all drive up more or less the same time. They come out of the car, they're waiting. There's no customer. There's one man. He calls them all out of the car. And he says, listen, guys, press your meters. I'm taking now a trip with each and every one of you. I will pay you every single shekel I owe you, beginning with now. Let your meters begin as though we're driving. It's my mother's day of the anniversary of my mother's passing. I didn't say Kaddish for her, the special prayer for her soul. Do me a favor, come into the synagogue a few minutes, let me say a prayer. I will pay each and every one of you full price as though I'm taking a full trip with you 3 o'clock in the morning. Okay, what do they care? They come into the synagogue. He prays the evening service we call Ma'ariv. He says the Kaddish for his mom. They leave the synagogue. He's so grateful. He comes to the first driver and he says, how much do I owe you? How many shekel do I owe you? Please look at the meter. I want to pay you. And the man looks at him and says, you want me to take money for you doing such a mitzvah of respecting your mother? I can't take money for it. The second one, the same thing. None of the taxi drivers agreed to take this man's money. They said, we want to be part of the mitzvah to be able to show respect to your mother. And then I realized, we're family. Now, what does it mean that we're family? Family doesn't mean that we always agree with each other, but it means we have to be able to always talk to each other, trust each other, support each other, love each other, and lean on each other. Just like in your family. Even in a marriage, do you always agree with your spouse? Tell me. You always agree with your spouse? Be honest. Sometimes you agree, hopefully often. Sometimes you disagree. Sometimes you have different perspectives. Husband is looking out one window, the wife is looking out another window. They see 2 different realities. But that doesn't mean your marriage is on the rocks. It just means that you have different ways of looking at the world. That's how it is in every marriage. Very few marriages lack this diversity. He has one disposition, she has a different disposition. They have different attitudes, different perspectives, different ways they grew up, different traumas, different fears, different insecurities, different issues, different virtues, different perceptions of life. That is normal. That's not the issue. You don't have to agree. What you do need is you have to be able to trust each other. The same is true with us as a people. I don't always have to agree with you. You don't always have to agree with me. We could look at things sometimes very differently. But don't stop talking to me. And don't dismiss me as your enemy. And don't develop negativity towards me. I may never develop negativity towards another person. Let's continue being here for each other, loving each other, supporting each other, leaning on each other. Why? Because we are connected. We're connected by history. We're connected by blood. We're connected by heritage. We're connected by history and by faith. And most importantly, we're connected spiritually. Our souls are one. We are brothers. We are sisters. We are siblings. We may be different in so many different ways. We may have different Jews have all different types of races. You can't compare Yemenite Jews to Sephardic Jews, to Ashkenazic Jews, to Ethiopian Jews, to Eidos HaMizrach Jews. You can't. Different ethnic groups, different races, different tastes, certainly different dispositions, different temperaments, different cultures. But still, one neshama, one soul. And nothing can change that. United by one Torah, united by one God. And sometimes we ourselves don't understand it, but our enemies understand it. Our enemies know how deeply connected we are. They disregard all the superficial differences that we take so seriously. For them, a Jew is a Jew is a Jew. So back to the Rebbe's discussion on Purim. The Rebbe said, if our enemies understand this, we shall not understand this. How could we not see the connection between every single Jew? How can I not reach out in love towards every single Jew, no matter who he is, who she is, the circumstances, their state of mind, their backgrounds, where they come from, their behavior? Because the name on the front of our jersey is far more significant and far more powerful than the name on the back of our jersey. Friends, I have to share with you this story because it happened not long ago, just right by Passover this year, 2020. Now, you all know I don't have to share this with you, that this Passover was a Passover like no other. We did not expect this coronavirus to hit or hit so hard. But as Passover was approaching, everybody realized this is going to be a manishtana halayla hazeh. This Passover is going to be different than every other Passover in history. My mother, may she be well and healthy, for the first time probably in her life, did the Seder all alone. All alone. As so many other mothers and fathers who were all alone, they could not go to children, they could not go to grandchildren. Grandchildren or children could not come to them because of the pandemic and the horrible casualties it was claiming day after day after day, especially in my neck of the woods here in Rockland County, New York, where my mother lives in Brooklyn. Simply the dangers of it, as everybody knows. So here's the story. And I heard the story a few days ago from a famous Israeli journalist who's a friend of mine, Sivan Rahav Meir. Initially, I thought it's just a nice story. There's stories. But she says that she actually heard it confirmed from the brother with whom it happened. The brother of the person with whom the story happened. Actually, it's an authentic, honest, real story. So there was this Jewish lady. There is this Jewish lady. She's a widow for quite a few years. And she lives in New York. And she realized she's going to be doing the Seder alone. She lives in her own apartment in an apartment building. And on her floor, there's another family, a Jewish family with children. So they asked her, I guess they called her, or they screamed through the hallway. They said, Mrs. So-and-so, would you like, if by the Seder, we open the door of our apartment, we could move the table closer to our door. You could sit closer to your door, near the corridor that connects our apartments. And that way, you will be able to join us. She couldn't come into their apartment because of the coronavirus, but you will sit in your place, we will sit in our place, and we will be able to hear each other. You'll be able to join us with the Haggadah and with the Manishtana and with all of the melodies and with all of the songs, Dai Dayeno, Dai Dayeno, and you'll have a sense of family because we know that your children won't be able to come to you. It's too dangerous for you, and you won't be able to come to your children. It's too dangerous for you. So let's do this. And she was so thrilled. She was so thrilled. She said, of course, thank you so much for thinking about me. Great. Passover comes, they do the Seder, they open the doors. She hears all the singing, the egg and the matzah and the myrrh and the charosas and the manashtana and the meal and the falling asleep, etc., and all the questions and all the answers and all the singing and the chadgadia and the afikoma, all good stuff. After Passover, after the holiday, her son calls her to see how his mommy is. And his son says to her, Mommy, how was the Seder, the first Seder of your life that you did yourself? Tati was not there for many years. She's a widow, but she couldn't be with her children. And she says to her son, you will not believe this. I want you to know that since your father died, I have not had a Seder like this. I have not had a Seder like this. What do you mean? He says. What do you mean? Jesus, I want you to know every custom of your father, they did. Every song of your father, they did. You know how your father loved singing almost every piece of the Haggadah? It literally felt like your father, my husband, was alive, sitting at the table. They literally followed every song and every custom and every tradition and every nuance. Crazy. I never had such a Seder. It literally felt like my husband was resurrected. And the boy, the son, tells his mother, he said, I want to tell you something. A week before Passover, this family called me. And they said, listen, you know we're going to have your mother for Passover. We're going to open the door. But we know how hard it is. We want you to record on a voice note or an MP3 or video, record all the songs that your father used to sing at his Seder, all the songs that your mother is used to, all the different traditions and customs and rituals he had at the Seder. We want you to record it and send it to us. I'm going to practice with my 7 children so that we can give your mother a meaningful and inspiring Seder. She won't feel lonely. And this is what the son tells his mother. They did it. They did it. And you know, I thought about this. I don't think anybody would mind opening the door so that an old widow, should be able to hear the music of your Seder. What's the big deal? What is so moving is the length to which they went, the thoughtfulness, putting yourselves into the shoes of another person and saying, wow, she's a widow, she's alone, she has nobody this year, not her children, not her grandchildren, and she's a widow. What can I do to really give her Seder a special Seder? I'm here with my 7 children. I'm lucky, thank God. I have a house filled with people, but she has nobody for Passover. What can I do? And that's what they thought. That's what they did. What a demonstration of caring, of connectedness, of camaraderie, of deep connection. That's what you call Jewish unity. I'll tell you what we did. I got this idea from my brother-in-law. I have a brother-in-law who lives in Cape Town, South Africa. He's a principal of a school there, the one Jewish high school in Cape Town. My brother-in-law is a principal there. And he had a great idea. And I stole his idea. I copied his idea and I sent it off to my part of the family. My mother is also a widow. So what we did was every one of her grandchildren and children wrote up a letter to their bubby, to their grandmother, about how they feel about her. They wanted to share something, their connection to her, what they learned from her, a blessing that they have for her. Every single one of her children and her grandchildren, which means me and all of my siblings, I have 4 siblings, and all of their children, whoever could, wrote up a letter. And a nephew of mine who lives a few blocks away from my mother, a few minutes before Passover, he took this envelope, he printed out all the letters, dozens and dozens of letters, and he put it under her door. And he called them the Manishtana letters. And he called my mother and he said, open up these letters right before you come to the Manishtan at your Seder. She's reading the Haggadah herself, my mother, and now she has an instruction. She has to open an envelope. She opens an envelope, and instead of hearing the questions of her children, Manishtana Lailaza, she has all these letters called the Manishtana letters where her children are sharing their feelings towards her. It was such a moving and beautiful gesture that my brother-in-law came up with for my in-laws. May they be well, and we did it for my mother, may she be well. But then, when I heard this story, I thought, how people can be so thoughtful about somebody who's not from their immediate family. She lives in the building. To go and record all the songs together with their children so they can give her the Seder of her lifetime. This is what Jewish unity means. This is what Jewish love means. My dearest friends, when I think of the yahrzeit of the Rebbe, I remember a story. And it's this story that I want to conclude my talk with. And then we'll go to the questions in the chat or on the yeshiva.net in the question section. I want to share with you this story and leave you with this episode. It happened in the early 1980s. There was an old man whom I knew. His name was Zalman Teibel. Zalman Teibel was a Russian Jew. He came out of Russia. He had a family. He was married as a young man, but he ultimately, I believe his wife died, and he had no family, no close family, no children. He had relatives, but no immediate family. He lived in the Crown Heights section of Brooklyn. He brought a song to Chabad. And it's a song that they sing in many Chabad houses around the world, including in Northern California. I don't know if every Chabad house, but many of them. It's a song that's on the words in Berich Shmei when we take out the Torah from the Ark on Shabbos and holidays. The words of the song mean, I am a servant, a conduit for God. I bow down to God and to His Torah. I do not put my trust, or I do not fear people. My entire trust is in God. He is truth. His Torah is true. His prophets are true. This is the song. It's a powerful, powerful message. It goes like this. Ano, avda de kush berichu. Ano, avda de kush berichu. Zalman Teibel, this Russian Jew, brought this song to the Chabad community. Whether he composed it or he heard it somewhere in his youth, I don't know, but he brought the song in the 60s. Life went on. Reb Zalman was an older man. He was already in his 80s or early 90s, and he became senile, whether he had dementia or Alzheimer's or another form of senility, but they put him in an old age home, a home for senior citizens, Eshel Avram, in the Borough Park section of Brooklyn. The day before Yom Kippur, on the eve of Yom Kippur, the Lubavitcher Rebbe had a custom. He would give everybody honey cake and wish them a good and sweet year. So the Rebbe gave everybody, whoever came by, he would give them a piece of honey cake with a blessing for a sweet year. And people knew that Rebbe Zalman Teibel used to be close to the Rebbe. Now he was in a home for senior citizens and he was not consciously present. He was senile, but they thought it would be nice for him to come get a blessing for the new year from the Lubavitcher Rebbe. So they took him out of the senior citizen home and they brought him to the Rebbe's headquarters, 770 Eastern Parkway. And two people held him up and brought him to the Rebbe's door. They allowed him to skip the line because of the unique situation. And the Rebbe would stand there by his door and give everybody a piece of honey cake and a blessing. And Rebbe Zalman Teibel stood there. And the Rebbe looked at him with the piece of cake. But the Rebbe realized that he was not here. And the Rebbe wanted to connect to him. And he waved the cake a few times and tried to grab his attention and revive him and stimulate him and trigger his memory, to no avail. Reb Zalman was completely out of it. He was there physically, but mentally he was completely not present. But the Rebbe wanted to connect to him, and he couldn't. It was a very sad moment because Reb Zalman Teibel used to eat every holiday with the Rebbe for many, many years. They were close. He was a very close disciple. And now he was senile. He came before Yom Kippur for a blessing, and the Rebbe couldn't connect to him. There was a big line. Thousands of people were waiting in line. The line would move very fast because everyone would just give a piece of honey cake and a blessing. It would move very, very fast. Hundreds and thousands of people. It just went. And here the Rebbe is trying to revive him, to communicate with him face to face, soul to soul, heart to know of him. You know what the Rebbe did? The Rebbe started to sing. Which song? The song that decades earlier, this man, Reb Zalman Teibel, the senile man, brought to Chabad. And the Rebbe himself, solo, started to sing. The Rebbe had a beautiful voice. Besides everything else, Lubavitcher Rebbe was had a beautiful voice. When he would sing a song, your heart could melt. And he started to sing. Ano, avda the Kodesh Aberichu. Ano, avda the Kodesh Aberichu. I am the servant of Hashem. V'sagidna kame, yomekame dekare, I say. Ano, avda the Kodesh Aberichu. V'sagidna kame, yomekame dekare, I say. Mekame dekare, I say. B'chol idam vidon. Mekame dekare, I say. B'chol idam vidon. The Rebbe is singing. His secretaries are startled because it's before Yom Kippur. It's a huge line, thousands of people. The Rebbe every second was measured. And here the Rebbe is standing like he has all the time in the world, relaxed, singing a song to an old senile man from an old age home. While thousands of people, the line stopped, they're waiting. And the Rebbe is staring at this man singing the song that he is the one who brought this song decades earlier to the Chabad community. In the middle of the Rebbe singing, he comes back. His mental capacity is restored. Because, this long-term memory, especially melodies from your youth, are so deeply embedded that you can have a person who has Alzheimer's or dementia and they don't remember anything that's going on. They can't remember anything that happened yesterday. But sometimes you'll sing a song from their youth and it will trigger so much inspiration and awareness. It's incredible. And that's what happened. The Rebbe singing, Zalman Teibel suddenly came to life. And he woke up and he sees he's standing in front of the Rebbe, his teacher, his master, the person who he considered a real man of God and who he was so deeply connected to and so much love. And he's there. He didn't know that he was there. And he broke out in such a smile. He was so excited that he's standing in front of the Rebbe. And he suddenly realized where he was, and the Rebbe saw that. And that's what the Rebbe wanted. And they connected. The Rebbe then gave him the piece of cake and a beautiful, beautiful blessing as he moved on to go greet the holiest day of the year. And the Rebbe continued to give honey cake to other people. And for me, this little story taught me volumes. The Lubavitcher Rebbe was a man of great influence. He was an extraordinary leader of global proportions. But yet, when there was a senile man, an old man, who really was, as they say, lived his life, needed assistance every moment, and was living in a home for senior citizens. And it's right before Yom Kippur. The Rebbe has a lot on his plate. Thousands of people are waiting online. And yet the whole world stopped. It was completely fine. The whole world stopped. So that a teacher should be able to connect to a student. So that a Rebbe should be able to connect with a chassid. That a father should be able to connect with a child. that one Jew should be able to connect with another Jew. That moment when eyes could meet and souls could kiss and hearts could connect. And that's happened, and the Rebbe was fine with that. Never, never allow your life to become so busy that you don't have time to connect with another soul. Never allow life to become so stressful, so overwhelmed, so entangled that you can't extricate yourself from the hustling and bustling and the burdens and anxiety and stress and realize what it's all about. Real connectivity between two people, between two neshamas, between two sparks of God, between two chelik elikami mals, between two souls. Never allow your life to become so frazzled, so scattered, that you don't have the time or the energy or the resources or the mental space to remember your greatest mission and my greatest mission, to be ambassadors of love, of light, of hope, of unity, and of redemption. My dearest friends, as we commemorate the 26th yahrzeit of one of the greatest Jewish leaders in Jewish history, a true man of God, a true man of love, a true man of scholarship, and a true man of holiness, the Rebbe of Lubavitch, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, of blessed memory. I want to ask myself, and I want to ask each and every one of you, to go home tonight, go home virtually, go home tonight, with this awareness, with this exercise, that I should know every single day. I have to ask myself before I went to sleep, what did I do today to promote more love in the world? What did I do today to promote more unity among our people? What did I do today to be an ambassador of hope and connection and connectivity and integration between two people, myself and somebody else? Maybe a text, maybe a WhatsApp, maybe a telephone call, maybe an email, maybe a meeting. The Baal Shem Tov says a soul comes down for 70, 80 years to do one favor for one Jew, physically and even more spiritually. It behooves us on this great night to be able to look in the mirror and tell ourselves, I want to redefine myself as an ambassador of God to this world. An ambassador of what? Somebody who becomes an agent of God's compassion, an agent of God's love, an agent of wisdom, of authenticity, of truth, of healing, an agent of love. Each and every single one of us has the ability to be able to reach out, to connect, to kindle hearts, to inspire souls, to embrace minds, and to empower each other, to be able to bring our world one step closer to redemption. Thank you very, very much. Let's go to the questions. Okay, let me go to chat. Atazoy, chat. Okay, let's see what's happening here. Okay, I was getting my mouse here.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Jacobson, for these wonderful, wonderful words of inspiration. And thank you also, Rabbi Levin, Rabbi Zalman Levin and his office for orchestrating this. What powerful words. God bless you for many years to continue carrying the message. And thank you, everyone, for joining.
Can I take some questions? Can I take some questions? Can I take some questions?
Yeah. I'm just now we go to the second part, the questions and answers. Absolutely.
Okay, I have a question. If Eve came from the rib of Adam, does that mean that they have the same DNA? Well, the rib of Adam is not really the Jewish version of it. I know the King James version of the Bible is translated Selah, that Eve was made from Adam's rib. There is such an opinion, but the majority of the commentators, including the Talmud, the Zohar, the Midrash, Rashi, is that Adam and Eve were more like Siamese twins. And then there was a surgical decoupling. But I guess that means that the DNA was pretty much sheared. Okay, next question. Okay, I see there's a lot of comments about the sound. I've been to Har Herzl, right outside of Bayit Vegan neighborhood in Jerusalem. Okay, yes, I've also been there. Next question. Black Lives Matters has been inundated with those who wish to do harm against Jews, Israel, regular people who have an ounce of intelligence. So this is the tragedy I was talking about, that I feel that a lot of people have very good intentions, but unfortunately there are the voices of those who clearly spew rhetoric of anti-Semitism. Okay? And it's important not to be politically correct about this, because as long as Black Lives Matter and similar organizations allow their platform to be abducted by people who have agendas against Jews or other minorities, it's ultimately going to prove to be unsuccessful, because people of us who have good conscience and would otherwise support it are going to get very, very turned off. So I turn to all my friends who care about racism and bigotry and want to see all types of prejudice to be lacking in our country, to do two things. First of all, the most important thing is the educational system. How is it that a white police officer can do this to a black man, even if he's a criminal? And he was a criminal, he wasn't a saint. But how can a white police officer do this to somebody? Number one. Number two, how can people in the name of justice loot and beat and rob and destroy properties of innocent people, including black people who haven't done anything wrong? And the answer is because we have educated a generation of children without the values of knowing right from wrong, and knowing that certain things are wrong, not because the police are going to catch you, but because the creator of the world expects of you to be decent and kind and moral and sensitive. And when we lack that in our school system and in our education, the results can be catastrophic. Next question. Is the chat disabled? No, it's not disabled. Okay, Rabbi, we all come from Adam, but aren't Jews special or superior? We get an additional soul on Shabbat than the average man or woman. You have to know what that means. Of course we're special. Jews have a unique mission. Every person is special. Every person is individual. But every non-Jewish person is also special. When you say the Jewish people were chosen, we were chosen to help every person realize that they were all chosen in their own way. So yes, Jews have a special mission. They have special mitzvahs. God has chosen them for a special mission. There's a special soul called the Jewish soul. But that doesn't mean that you're chosen in a sense that you can disregard other people. If that's what it means, then it means you don't realize what it means you were chosen. Elie Wiesel used to say, we weren't chosen for benefits. I would say we were chosen to reveal that every person was chosen in their own way. Rabbi, I had a hallway seder in Manhattan. I had the idea, and 7 families opened their doors. Wow, you must have had an interesting seder, 7 seders together. I love that. Why does one need a minyan to talk with God and say Kaddish. You don't need a minyan to talk with God. You could talk with God even without a minyan. You could talk with God face to face. But there's a certain energy that is available in the world when you have a minyan. And that energy can only come when you have a community, when you have people together. Not that you're talking to God is not powerful. Sometimes it's the most powerful. But there's something that happens when there's 10 together, like reading the Torah, saying Kaddish, saying Nakdishach, saying Baruch Hu, etc. Next question. How does one stay connected to friends who are moving on in life to other places? Well, that's why Zoom was created, and that's why FaceTime was created. You stay connected by staying connected. You write letters to each other, you talk on the phone, and you think about each other. Next question. Do you see this latest pandemic as meaningful, and how? I see it as very meaningful in many ways, but the one thing I would emphasize is that I think the pandemic has helped many of us during quarantine reevaluate our priorities, discover things about ourselves and our loved ones that we have not realized before. And I hope that we will not emerge from this and just go back to normal. Rather, we will emerge from this much more wise and much more blessed. Both of my children stood at the Jewish retreat when you spoke, but my youngest feels that God is not good because he allows people to do bad things. What do I say to him? What also will happen when Mashiach comes and we will not have free will to do bad? The answer to your question is that God could have created us as robots. God could have genetically created us as creatures who are just following a certain predisposition and a program without any choice. God could have done that. Remember, the angels are that way. All of the animals and fish and reptiles and insects and mammals and birds and trees and bushes and shrubs, everybody follows their DNA, their genetic program, and they can't deviate in any way. The only living organisms who can deviate and who can question everything is the human being. And the reason for that is because we are partners in creation. We are, so to speak, the ones who were responsible to integrate all of creation and ultimately fulfill our purpose through free choice, through volition, through choosing the relationship. And that is so precious to God that he does not want to take away that gift from us, because free choice is the ultimate belief in the capacity of mankind to recreate itself in the image of God. So God will not take that away. Rabbi, it's everywhere here in Northern California. My now grown children are quiet about this. They want to fit in. I hear you. Okay, I understand. Next question. How do we view some Jews who are criminals? They have the same Jewish soul. They're part of the Jewish family. How should we view them? Well, a criminal is a criminal. Somebody can have, God forbid, in their family a criminal. You don't enable a criminal and you don't help a criminal to perform something that's criminal. Of course not. Criminals have to be brought to justice. So there's really no contradiction here, because one has to very much appreciate and respect the fact that if somebody is harming society, then it's extremely important that justice should be served. We cannot allow other people to suffer just because you have somebody in the family who's not, unfortunately, doing something criminal. The most important thing is to reach out to people and help them repent, help them become better, help them change their ways. But we don't cover up for criminals just because they're part of our family. I mean, that does not make sense. You can't help anybody that way. On Black Lives Matter, Statement of Policies, there's a page where they accuse Israel of apartheid and genocide against the Palestinians. They demand the U.S. to stop giving aid to Israel unless Israel treats the Palestinians according to Black Lives Matter's demands. Okay? And that's tragic. It's all nice and good, what you're saying. But what about the question of who is a Jew and other basic things that are so fundamental to Judaism? 100%. No Jew has the ability to be able to change Judaism. This was not a call to change anything about Judaism. I don't have the ability, nor do you have the ability to change Judaism. There is something called the Jewish tradition. There's something called the Jewish people. On the contrary, when we really appreciate Judaism, we know that every single Jew who is a Jew is deeply connected to Judaism. And Judaism is connected to every single Jew, and Judaism belongs to every Jew. So this is not about changing anything in Judaism. This is not about compromising, not taking things seriously, disregarding Torah. On the contrary, the most important mitzvah of Torah is, as Hillel said, the essence of the whole Torah. How do you teach somebody Torah standing on one foot? What did Hillel say? Treat somebody else like you treat yourself. The more connected to Torah you are, the more love you have in your heart. It's the other way around. People who are deeply, deeply dedicated to Torah are filled with love towards other people, and certainly towards other Jews, but really towards other people, and I'll tell you why. When somebody is deeply connected to Torah, it means that this is a person who sees the soul in everybody and everything. That's what Torah is about. And the moment I can identify the soul in everybody and everything, love becomes organic, it becomes intrinsic, it becomes innate. That's why Jews who are the most connected to Torah are the least judgmental Jews. Take the Rebbe. The Rebbe, everybody knows, was committed to Torah beyond any words that I can express. The Rebbe's unyielding, tenacious commitment to Torah and mitzvahs was absolute, it was profound to the point of the greatest self-sacrifice. And yet, the Rebbe was one of the most loving and least judgmental people you would meet. Not because he didn't have principles. On the contrary, because his principles were so deep, because he was so deeply committed to God and God's will. There was no ego. There was no agenda. There was no politics. So therefore, it was completely about identifying the soul in every person. Not because he always agreed with everybody, but there was no element of ego in religion. There was no politics. It wasn't me versus you. It wasn't holier than thou. All these things fell away because of his deep commitment to Torah. It's something I wish people would understand a little more. Why doesn't a Jewish organization that asks for funds to fight anti-Semitism come up with a definition of anti-Semitism and explain to the world what it means to be anti-Semitic? Okay, they should do that. We are chosen to bring the light of Torah to the world. Okay, the ADL, you're writing about the ADL, but that's a separate parsha. Can something be done to do this program more often? Chabad of Northern California, they're the best. Is it a mitzvah to give hope to a non-Jew who has lost all hope? I believe our job in the world is to promote love and goodness and kindness. Maimonides says that the job of the Jew is not only to encourage other Jews, it's also to influence the whole non-Jewish world. Or lagoyim, a light unto the nations. It's not just the nations collectively, it's every person individually. So I believe, yes, there is such a mitzvah. Why is it okay for non-essential businesses in Brooklyn to open against the governor's orders? You'll have to speak to the owners of those businesses. I live in Muncie here in the forest. Nobody opened up here. We're all quarantined. This is a lot of questions, a lot of questions. Okay. My Nigerian writer believes he's Jewish. He davens 3 times a day. But how does he and his family become Jewish? Would it be accepted? I don't know the story, but generally, according to Judaism, either you're born to a Jewish mother and you're fully Jewish, or you go through a conversion according to Jewish law. Why do some Jews believe they're above the law of the land? In the middle of COVID, they broke the law and opened non-essential businesses. Again, you'll have to ask them, but generally, we are people who respect the law. We are obligated by our religion to follow the advice of doctors and health officials and medical experts, and that is Jewish law. Jewish law is that you follow the advice of medical health officials. Okay, there's another few questions here. So let me take the last questions. I'm going to take the last questions here. Okay, here we go. According to Judaism, either you're born to a Jewish mother and you're fully Jewish, or you go through a next question according to Jewish law. Okay. How does one of my siblings, why do some Jews believe they're above the law of the land? Let me just lower the volume here. Broke the law and opened non-essential business. I'm lowering the volume so we could there won't be an echo. Okay. One of my siblings is not talking to one of my parents. I'm sorry. This parent is a narcissist. I don't know if it's possible to get the parent to hear why my sibling is so hurt by the parent. I want to bring peace between them, but I don't think it's possible to do it in a way that would be respectful to my parent. Do you have any advice? Okay. It's a very important question. And the answer I would say to you is, this is something where your sibling needs the advice of a top professional of how to create the proper boundaries between your sibling and your parents. If it's true that this parent is a narcissist, which I don't know, but if it's true, it may be that your sibling has suffered a lot and he or she is scared of being hurt. So they need professional advice of how to create the proper boundaries and build a relationship from that. It's very, very important that parents should speak to children and children should speak to parents. But sometimes for that to happen, you need help to create boundaries. This is not about being stubborn. Don't be stubborn and don't try to score victories and take revenge. That's not going to help you. But it is important to find the proper balance between respect and not allowing the respect to be translated into manipulation and narcissism taking over. So this is a very important balance, which you often need the help of a professional. Again, to cut off all ties forever, in most cases, that should not happen. It's painful. It's not the way to go. It is important, though, not to go to the other extreme, to create boundaries. Next question. When the rabbi is speaking about families arguing and being unified, your chat got closed down. It was not intentional. People tell me that everything you see and hear creates a life in your mind and it never goes away. I've seen a lot of unholy and inappropriate videos, makes me feel very discouraged, and my evil inclination tells me there's no point in stopping. How can I repent and be holy if these images in my mind never go away? The answer is, it may be difficult to get rid of images of your mind, but of course you can change your life. Every person is a master of the future of their life. And of course, if a person is addicted to screens and addicted to videos and addicted to movies to the point that it's compromising the quality of your life and your mental space, you should stop immediately. If it's a real addiction, you may need help. And slowly you will be able to extricate yourself from it. Do not give up. This is a very powerful opportunity for you to transform yourself. Next question. California has the highest intermarriage rate in the country. What can be done to slow this trend? If you say education, the many Chabad houses and other outreach groups have barely made a dent in this trend. What else can be done? Rabbi Resnick, maybe you want to answer? Rabbi Cohen, Rabbi Resnick, Rabbi Levin. You hear the question? Anybody, any one of the Chabad rabbis in California? You hear what this person is asking? He said California has the highest intermarriage rate in the country. What can be done to slow the trend? The many Chabad houses and other outreach groups outside of Chabad have barely made a dent. What else can be done? What are they going to do? Or they're just giving up? Education is the only answer to the Rebbe taught us. Educating children how lucky they are with their special mission that they have. And then they know that if they get intermarried, they lose their mission. They have to have a partner together with them on the same page. And it starts as soon as the children are born to give them the right feeling. A lot has to be done. And you can't expect everyone has to be a partner. Everyone should join forces and make this person okay? You hear what Rabbi Cohen says? It's all basically about education. But listen, sometimes, yeah, I'll be very frank with you. When a Chabad rabbi moves to California or anywhere else in the world, if you'll tell this Chabad rabbi, change every Jew in California, he won't begin to do anything. The way the Chabad rabbis, and probably the way every rabbi works in the most effective way is, I am here to influence and inspire one person at a time. Person by person, by person, by person, by person, by person, by person. And that's how we change the world. If I come to a city and I say, I'm going to change the whole city, I'm going to change the whole state, I'm going to change the whole America, I'm going to change the whole world. What am I going to end up doing? I'll end up being frustrated and upset. But look at coronavirus. Look at the coronavirus. One man sneezes in Wuhan, China, and the whole world gets affected. One man touches a doorknob in Milan, and the whole planet is affected. One little invisible virus travels from person to person in ways that we can't even imagine to affect the whole humanity. If this is true with a virus, it's certainly true with goodness, with spirituality, with holiness, with godliness, with Torah, with mitzvahs. So therefore, the Rebbe would always tell all of his students and all of his emissaries and all of his disciples and anybody who wanted to listen, don't underestimate the power of influencing one person, two people, three people, 5 people, 10 people, 50 people. Because if a virus can travel and literally from one person, the whole world, all of humanity, 7.7 billion people could be affected. Imagine the power of goodness, even if it's not always so visible. The coronavirus was also not visible for thousands of years. Through microscopic instruments, we discovered what it is. So with positivity, it's also that way. So yet we may not always figure out the ultimate solution of how to transform everybody and everything. But what's the alternative? Is the alternative, let's not start? Or the alternative is, to quote Maimonides, you view the world as a scale, and both sides of the scale are equally balanced. And you do one mitzvah and you bring in light to the world, you tip the scale, and perhaps you transform the whole world. That's a much more powerful and more authentic way of viewing it. How can we create, next question, how can we create and nurture mutually respectful and supportive relationships between Jews of all denominations? I think by being living examples of this attitude, of this philosophy. That's how we do it. We, instead of, you have to know when to be quiet. You want to bring out the best in people, not the worst in people. And I think when we live this way and we breathe it and we embody it, we can teach it to other people. I don't know how you'll answer this, and I'm asking in advance. How do you reconcile the current atmosphere that slavery is evil with the Torah that endorses it and actually forbids emancipation v'hisnachaltem. I'm not referring the off-the-radar cruel owners. And if one kills a slave within 24 hours is a capital crime. It's a very good question. I don't know if it's for this session now because it's really a long question. The only thing I will tell you is that you do have to understand that in the time when slavery was allowed in the Torah, you are dealing here what's called an Evet Knaini, a slave of the Canaanite nations. And you have to understand that most of these nations, all of these nations, were sacrificing children to their gods. Okay? The value of human life was less than zero. The value of women was non-existent. Women were seen as the property of their husbands. Children were seen as the properties of their fathers. Slaves could be fed to the lion or the tiger or be slashed to the gladiators. Criminals could be thrown off roofs. The value of human life was absolutely naught and insignificant. So if you would ask anybody, here's a choice. You could be a free man in Rome, or you could be a servant by the Jewish people. You know what they would choose? It was in most cases the greatest benefit for them, the greatest emancipation for them to be able to live in a society where there was absolute dignity. Do you know that if a Jewish master hit his slave, he would get lashes in court? So Maimonides states in the laws of Sanhedrin, owner, forget about kill. If he kills him, he gets killed. But if he just beats him, if he hits his non-Jewish slave, he gets serious lashes in the court. So that level of dignity was absolutely unheard of. I'm just describing to you one aspect of what slavery meant during that time when the Torah spoke about it. Okay, I see there's quite another few questions. Rabbi Resnick, do you want me to take more questions? Okay, so let's take one more question. Okay, I see there's a lot more questions, but let's take one more question. Why is it okay? I'm gonna say two things here. First of all, I'm in the same position. My husband has narcissistic traits. Do you have any resources you would recommend? Also, do you have any resources you would suggest for interfaith families? Well, first of all, I'm very, very sorry. In terms of your husband's narcissism, of course, without knowing him, it's hard for me to give advice. But there's two types of narcissists. There's a narcissist who's completely deaf. He's just not capable of hearing anything. And then there's a narcissist who's feeling the pain. And with a real empathetic professional, he could learn that his narcissism is coming from his deep pain, probably as a child, not trusting anybody and anything in the world. And that's why he feels that everything has to be his because of terrible trauma. And if he's feeling his pain, a great empathetic healer can help him identify his trauma and emancipate himself a little bit from his narcissism. So it depends on what spectrum his narcissistic personality disorder is, because there are narcissists who are feeling the pain. And if somebody knows how to talk to them with intelligence, because they're usually smart people, but if somebody knows with intelligence how to get to them, you can touch them slowly. They won't break down the first time, but you can touch them and help them realize how much they're suffering and that their narcissism is really a symptom of the fact that they feel that they have nothing in this world. They own nothing, and therefore they have to own everything. Nothing is about them, and therefore everything has to be about them. The moment they can identify that, even if they will not be completely healed, but it can be a game changer for the future of their lives. I don't know where your husband is, but this is a very important distinction. Now, this person asks, why marry Jewish when a non-religious Jew is closer to a non-Jew than a Jew? I don't know what you mean about that. Why marry Jewish? I mean, the main reason I would say to marry Jewish is two main things to marry Jewish. Three main things. First of all, marriage is difficult. Every marriage is difficult. When you marry somebody from the same people like you, from the same nation like you, there's much more chances that the marriage could be very deeply stable. Not because Jews or non-Jews are better or worse. It's just the less differences and dramatic differences, the more chances for stability. Number two, there's something that Jews share that is very, very deep. And it becomes very difficult to have that when you're married to a non-Jew. Again, not because you're better or they're worse or they're better or you're worse, just a very different nation. The third thing is, and this is maybe the most important, when you're marrying the non-Jew, at that point, Judaism may mean nothing to you. But the problem is, you're probably going to have children. And they're going to grow up. And suddenly you will realize, and they will probably also realize, that their religion plays a factor. And then what seemed insignificant will become very significant. And it often becomes a very deep source of contention and strife, of seeing it again and again. And those are some of the reasons I would say a person should try to marry Jewish. And it's worth to fight for this. Chaim says, why is it that only Chabad cares about the Gentile world way beyond what the rest of the religious world is busy with? It's hard for me to answer this question, but what I would say is that Rabbi Ovadia Sefarno, one of the greatest Italian biblical commentators in the 15th century, writes, when it says in Yisro that the Jews are a kingdom of princes and a holy nation, what does it mean, a kingdom of princes, Mamlechet Kohanim? Their job is to inspire the whole civilization. Prophet Isaiah says, I made you a light unto the nations. Maimonides writes in the Laws of Kings that Jews were given a mandate at Sinai to influence the whole non-Jewish world to observe the 7 Noahide laws, the basics of human civilization. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe, during the 1980s and 90s, would speak about this very often. And he would say that throughout history, we never had the opportunity. We were always on the defensive. We could barely survive on our own. So who even thought about influencing the world? But he says today in America and other parts of the world, the non-Jewish world looks up to the Jewish world. He says, you could be today moral teachers, humble teachers, mentors to civilization of how to live, introduce the ethical values of Torah that belong to all of humanity, and they will welcome it. The non-Jewish world respects Jews who respect Judaism. They're embarrassed by Jews who are embarrassed by Judaism. My dearest friends, I love you. I bless you. Have a beautiful